Thank you so much for spending some time with me today, and I'm really excited to share our session with you. I'm going to actually bring up the screen for you right now. And I believe that Shaquille O'Neal was just on the main stage, so I think this is the only time I'll ever be of a similar stature to Shaquille O'Neal, thanks to the magic of Zoom. So there we go. And I'm just getting us all nice and lined up here. I hope everyone is doing well, wherever they are in the world, and really excited to share some thinking with you. And the focus of today's workshop is really creating impact that drives business growth. And this is really about you and really helping you with your business. So I'm going to share some thinking up front, and then we're going to dive into a few questions that will be supported by other thinking. But I want to make sure that you enter any questions you have in the chat as we go. I've got the chat here set for myself. And also you can also put your hand up and you can also unmute yourself and ask a question as we go through. But I really, really appreciate everybody's time. I know how important our lives are, so how busy our lives are. So let's dive in. The first thing I want to share with you today is that I don't know how you're all feeling, but it's been easy to be overwhelmed in the last 6 to 12 months. We have so many competing challenges, whether it's things as lofty as, the climate emergency to, the very important Black Lives Matter movement and, the tragic, pandemic, through to running our businesses, running our personal lives, and actually putting pens down occasionally and taking a break. And so one of the challenges we all have is, how do you turn today's challenges, these sort of obstacles to our lives, how do you turn them into growth drivers for your business? How do you actually have a positive impact and solve for these issues at the same time as you're driving business growth? And that's really what I want to share with you today. Now, I'm Simon Mainwaring. I'm the CEO and founder of We First, and we're a strategic consultancy here in Los Angeles that builds purpose-driven brands, whether you're a VC or private equity-backed startup or a very large global enterprise. And we've been doing this for 10 years. So what I'm sharing with you today is really informed by all that expertise. And, here's a fundamental sort of reframing I want to share with you. For many companies, it's all they can do to just build on the past, to be in the present and incrementally, iteratively move forward. But I want to interrupt that out of the gate. I want to stop that immediately, because we deeply believe that you need to, in fact, back out of the future. You need to actually project where your business or brand will be in 3 to 5 years, and then back out of that reality. Why? Because otherwise we won't be changing fast enough. And the reality of how quickly and how much we change is about to be torn from our hands, because these challenges, the climate emergency, loss of biodiversity, social inequities, they're all compounding in the future and hurtling back towards us in the present, in which case there's this hockey stick of expectation coming towards us from the future. And so we need to prepare for that. We need to adjust our mindset appropriately. And let's look at some of these challenges. We've got the climate emergency. That's one. We've got, plastics in the ocean and loss of biodiversity. We've got the pandemic. We've got, the very important Black Lives Matter movement that many companies now are responding to meaningfully and authentically, arguably for the first time. We've got a younger demographic coming through, millennials and especially Gen Z, who are acutely aware of how their future has been compromised, and they're not going to stand for it. They're going to hold companies and leadership accountable. And so with all of that in mind, we've got to think about how we do business differently, because as Ryan Gellert, the new CEO of Patagonia, said in an article in Fast Company not long ago, the great challenge for leadership in whatever capacity, whether you're a founder, a CEO, whether you're a change agent, is not just one crisis, but how you deal with multiple crises at once. And so they're all complicating our daily experience of life and compromising our future. Now, that's just really designed to get us clear-eyed about the reality of the world we live in, not to kind of totally bum you out on hump day on a Wednesday in the middle of your week. But, we need to see, we are not in the same place as we were 10 years ago, and we need to think and act differently. And because of that, we're facing rising expectations. For example, you saw Patagonia, when the former president was giving mining rights, access to public lands, Patagonia very quickly, within a matter of hours, did a website takeover and said the president stole your land. Or, you see the CEOs of companies like Dick's Sporting Goods or Delta Airlines responding to the tragic school shootings and banning and ultimately destroying assault rifles. You see just most recently a coalition of CEOs and companies all across the country really waking up to the challenge of sort of, ensuring and protecting people's right to vote. This is all outside the normal purview of business. This is the new normal. We're expected to sort of not just transcend our products and services or category, but really to shape culture. And this is a huge new expectation on business. And we're also facing scrutiny for how well we're responding to that. And just think of a couple of notable examples. Speaking of the Black Lives Matter movement, we all probably recall when, PepsiCo, they did a Pepsi ad with Kendall Jenner, and, effectively it was hijacking the Black Lives Matter movement in a way that was seen as really disingenuous. And there was huge media blowback. Kendall was in tears and apologized, the brand apologized. Or on the right here, you see one of the probably the most misguided product packaging efforts I've seen in a while, where the lettuce, bacon, and tomato sandwich was suddenly repurposed to have an LGBT, and there's no Q or I, but really, someone internally should have, because that there was like 5 or 10 people internally going, this is a really bad idea. We shouldn't be doing this. And, no one spoke up and no one said anything. And so, a very notable example. And then obviously you see the disingenuous or deceitful behavior of some companies like VW with their diesel emission scandal. And actually this week, Michael Winterhorn is, the judgments are going down against the company and against him for, their role in the role of leadership in this crisis. And they say, arguably in the press that I read, that it cost the company upwards of $32 billion to be disingenuous about the impact that they were having. So very, very, very cautionary tales. And so, we've actually got a question here from Mikey as we're diving into this. What's greenwashing called when brands co-opt allyship? It's a very good question, Mickey, sorry. There is a number of different ways that brands can show up authentically, and that can include allyship, where you're aligning around certain issues that are important to you. It can be advocacy, when you're actually advocating for policy change, or it could be activism, where you're actually pushing back very stridently, as you saw with Ben & Jerry's around white supremacy, or Patagonia over, the protection of public lands. When a company tries to, execute greenwashing through those lenses, here's what I'd say to you. The reason I'm optimistic about that is, firstly, not only do you have consumer activism, but you have employee activism. Just look at the exposure of companies like Facebook and Google and Amazon over climate and pay scales. Employees inside the company with a unique line of sight are calling out disingenuous behaviors because it doesn't align with who they are as people. Then, of course, you've got the media activism out there as well, where it's a daily diet, a sport of calling out brands that are being disingenuous. And that is not even, that's just talking about up to the last 18 months. But in the last, 14 months, 15 months with the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement, there's even greater scrutiny on business, especially around their ESG claims. And so, as it gets more competitive, companies have to demonstrate greater transparency. They have to be more accountable. Employees, media, customers, consumers, investors are really calling out companies. So if someone's going to go down the greenwashing aisle, approach through allyship, I think we can all feel pretty confident they're going to get called out pretty quickly. It's very sort of self-correcting or course-correcting the marketplace now. And with that in mind, we really need to rise to the challenge of shaping culture. We need to think, okay, it's not just about getting our product to market and selling things, but rather it's about playing a meaningful role in people's lives that's going to improve their lives and therefore make them want to buy your product because of the role you're playing in the world. And we see this with Nike, with Colin Kaepernick and the taking a knee and the issues that took a hit on their stock price, but then a week later, they had a record stock price. But it was all against, them standing up and creating a platform for athletes around, the protesting against police violence against people of color. Or if you see, as I mentioned, Ben & Jerry's very actively pushing back against white supremacy. And it was instructive to see that when they got so much great PR around that and a big write-up on the front page of the New York Times, it wasn't because they suddenly turned on a light switch in response to the crisis, but rather they'd been doing work in that area for 10 years. And so they were better prepared, equipped, and more credible, speaking to that issue. And then you also see hate speech. You see companies, I'm just plugging in my computer here, one of those things that always keeps us honest. You see companies like Timberland leading the charge against hate speech, which is such, a pervasive issue and increasing the divisiveness out there in the world, that is, being compounded by social media. And so you're seeing brands show up in incredibly meaningful ways, and the bar of expectation is getting higher, especially as the issues we're solving for are getting more acute. And so what we deeply believe at We First, my company, is that the future belongs to brands that lead with we, which is simply brands that rally all their stakeholders to play a meaningful role in ways that add value to everybody's life. And so it's really about collaborative leadership, working together to solve for issues that affect us all. And this is not just our opinion. This is not just, anecdotal. If we look around at the press or Super Bowl ads or the latest, brand taking a stand, market forces are demanding it. We've all probably heard of Larry Fink, who is the CEO of the largest money management firm in the world that manages almost $9 trillion in assets, talking through his annual letter each year about the coming of a fundamental restructuring of the capital markets. Why? Because the climate crisis is such that it's going to impact all industries, infrastructure, B2B, B2C, and it's not responsible of them to invest recommending in companies that aren't prepared to weather this coming storm. And it's not just Larry Fink. It's 181 CEOs of the Business Roundtable that, signed a shared declaration as to the new purpose of a corporation, which is in fact focused on purpose and not solely on a fiduciary duty to shareholders. It's about stakeholder capitalism, not just shareholder capitalism. And then also, the CEOs of the B Corp, community that then came out and said, well, that's great, Business Roundtable, but are you walking your talk? Are you making a difference out there in the world? And so this is an active, visceral, dynamic dialogue that is living and breathing every day. And so with that in mind, how do we solve for it? What do? You are trying to manage your personal life. You're trying to manage your professional life. You have all of these different crises to deal with. All of these crises to different degrees are affecting your supply chain. Your employee culture has suffered and everyone's trying to build a resilient culture. Consumers are still cautious to get back out there. I mean, Friday afternoons, that first drink on a Friday afternoon, that's why it tastes sweeter than ever, because everyone's like, oh my goodness, this is a really, really challenging time. And so the way you solve for it is to shift your mindset from brand building to movement making. Why? Because people want to buy from, work for, or invest in companies that are doing good. And when you shift to movement making, it will change the marketing you do. It's going to impact what brands people buy, and it'll really redefine what companies lead tomorrow. And with that in mind, what's the first step? The first step is put purpose first. There's been a lot of dialogue, especially over the last few years, about the purpose of a company, why you exist. But in terms of the forced ranking between purpose and profit, they are not in opposition. They are two sides of the same coin. We've been doing this work with Tom's and Timberland and so many other companies. And really the market forces are in place now, where the more you lean into your purpose, you'll get several bottom line benefits, from mitigating the risk of consumer or media activism, employee activism. You will be able to win the talent wars. You'll actually build your reputation, and you'll be relevant to the future. You'll be on the right side of history. So as you sit there going, when do I lean into my product and when do I lean into my purpose? Lead with your purpose and position your products as social proof of that purpose for the reasons, the context I shared in the first place. And then, you might say, okay, well, how do I define my purpose? And here are 3 key questions in terms of our methodology that we use with brands and that might be helpful to you. Ask yourself, what is your enemy? What is the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning? What is the thing that you talk about too much at dinner parties? What is that thing that you bore people with because it just annoys you so much you've got to fix it? That is part of the reason your company exists. And what are you the only of? Because there's only one team like yours. There's only one leadership like yours. There's only one moment in time, one category, one product like yours. And the combination of all of those is truly unique. So what are you the only of? And also, when you're at your best, what are you doing? When you are doing that absolute, you've crushed it. You've had a really successful day in your business and you're high-fiving your team, or if you're a solopreneur, you're high-fiving yourself in the mirror and wondering if that's weird. what is that thing that you are doing? When you answer these questions, would you actually take the time to write down the questions and write down the answers, you'll start to see themes emerge as to what your company exists for. What is your reason for being? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And just to kind of give you a sense of what that can look like, see if you know what these three companies are. Who can recognize what these three companies are? You've got to save our home planet. You've got to create a world where anyone can belong anywhere. You've got to make beauty a source of confidence, not anxiety. Well, we've got Patagonia at the top. We've got Airbnb in the middle. And you've got Dove, which is one of the Unilever brands at the bottom. So some things to take away. And Jacques, welcome from Paris. Fantastic that you can join us. And, they're simple. It's very accessible language. And there's a lot of compressed complexity in it because Dove can solve for beauty in many, many different ways through many different activations. Airbnb is in the belonging business. Patagonia at the top, it can save our home planet in so many different ways. So there's a lot of compressed complexity in there. So first question for you, and then I'd love folks to sort of pop their answers in the chat. If you don't know where the chat is, just click on the chat bar that you see, down there at the bottom of your Zoom. What is your biggest barrier to leading with purpose inside your company? What is your biggest barrier? Like I've got some listed there. Lack of leadership or leadership buy-in? Is it people inside the company don't understand what your purpose is, so it can't inform their daily role? Do you not have the cost or resources, especially during COVID? Do you find there's a weariness amongst your consumers? So we see from Yuko here, a lack of resources. From Kim, a difference of opinion. So a lack of resources, I want to speak to that. The lack of resources is you've got to make the business case internally for why to prioritize it. And the way to do that is show the research, the data that supports leading with your purpose from, Edelman and from Harvard Media and from Ernst & Young and from PwC. Show the competitive set, what your competitors are doing out there in the world, in your category and beyond, and then do a cost-benefit analysis as to the cost of doing it, but also the cost of not doing it, in that you won't have that relevance. You can lose market share. You won't be able to attract the employees that will build your future. We also see here from other folks, difference of opinion, lack of a clear vision, fear of offending the stakeholders. Yeah, you've got a lot of differences of opinions out there. Sometimes the investor priority, if they're not sort of, awake to the needs that we need from, the public markets right now, they may be just all focused on returns and they may be competing against you. Also, we see here another from Mickey, noise and the rise of truthiness and the abundance of facts to fit reality rather than the facts and truth. I think misinformation is a huge issue out there that's being compounded by social media. And it was interesting to see during COVID, folks like the UN and others really start to identify pieces of information on social media as verified. And WhatsApp created a tool in their app to allow you to check out information or to expose disinformation that might be competing against people's health and well-being. So people are actively taking a role against that. And a lack of identity here from Deborah. If a brand doesn't know itself, how can anybody else know who it is? And the starting point is to really interview employees. It could be as simple as a survey. Interview key stakeholders. Ask those key questions. What is your enemy? What are you the only of? When you're at your best, what are you doing? And ladder up, interrogate those themes and define the language that will define your purpose. And it should be simple and it should be scalable and it should have that complexity in it to speak to all aspects of your business. And strategy misalignment there from Cordell. And that is about getting everyone in the one room together and really exposing those areas of alignment, but also the areas of disagreement. And so let's move on to the next step. And thank you for all that great input. You've got to set ambitious goals, ambitious but achievable goals. What does that mean? Well, look at Nike. It's incredibly simple. This is their sustainability platform, move to zero, move to a zero carbon footprint. And we're seeing so many companies put out there right now their commitments 2025, 2030, 2050. We see the US Retailers Plastics Pact to really phase out plastics. Why? Because they're mitigating risk to their business, and it's also, an opportunity for innovation that will propel their business in the future. Or another example, there is a new CPG company out there called Grove Collaborative, which, in very short time, almost overnight, by 2025, they want to be 100% plastics free. And we have a question here from Sayatan, which is, what if the purpose is a decade early to gain traction, but the trends are clear? Being a front runner, being a leader isn't easy. But, at the same time, when you look at the Patagonias, the Unilevers, the PepsiCos of the world for the last decade and longer, they've been out front, taking all those hits, leading the charge. And now there's so much more momentum behind and so many more market forces behind being purposeful. So I think you just need to lay out the business case and the wealth of evidence out there with leadership inside your company. And in my opinion, it is 100% here. It is fundamental to the business case and the value proposition of any company through the lens of all stakeholders, suppliers that are facing scrutiny, employees to win the talent wars, customers to grow your business, and investors, in terms of, the capital that makes business possible. And so the next question, what is one ambitious but achievable impact goal for your brand in the next 3 years? So just share. We don't know what your brand is. We don't know what your company is. So you're not giving away anything, IP or intellectual property or anything. But look how simple Nike's was in their sustainability report in the past. Double our business, halve our impact. Double our business, halve our impact. What is one goal that you could put in the chat there that you could say in the next 3 to 5 years, we want our business to be? Because it's very instructive for everyone to see what that can look like. And I think, when you define what your purpose is, it's very, very easy to then click one level down and define what your goal can be. And when you see General Mills, when you see Kellogg's, when you see General Motors, phasing out combustion engine vehicles, you suddenly realize that the weight of opinion inside business is shifting. And here we see Cecilia saying, I find it challenging to have an ambitious goal with limited or no network support. And yeah, I think preceding having that goal is really putting purpose first. And to put purpose first, you've got to generate that buy-in. You've got to make the business case for it by what? Showing them the research, showing them the competitive set, and then doing a cost-benefit analysis of not only doing it, but not doing it. And in our experience, what we found is when you do that, leadership will sort of at first may still resist, or the CFO will frown at you and say it's not the priority, or we've just got to get into this new market, or we've just got to launch this new product. But then a few days later, they'll be like, oh, that's interesting. And then they'll be like, oh, our competitors are doing that. And then when you really talk to them about the cost of not doing it, then that dialogue will start to unlock. But it does take a little bit of pressure. And we see a goal here from UCO, create more job opportunities and access for resources for artists, people of color, LGBTQI, and the disability community. I think, those that have been marginalized in the past are finally getting the support and opportunities they deserve. Nowhere near enough, but it's happening. So that's a very powerful goal. And so let's keep going. So we put purpose first, we've set goals. And then the third thing you need to do, and these are all building on each other. This is about how you generate movement making. You engage, activate, and inspire employees. Engage, activate, and inspire employees. And Sayatan just said, one of the goals is support parents so they can enjoy their parenthood and so the kids can enjoy their childhood. So how do you engage and activate your employees? Well, there's so many different examples out there today. You've got, for example, Timberland, its Path to Service, that has upwards of 92% of their employees that show up to do tree planting initiatives. You've got UPS that didn't just support its essential workers during COVID, but actually thanked them and asked people to thank them. And all the letters there in the bottom right is all about not just inspiring your employees to show up, but recognizing them for showing up. Or, you see with Starbucks on the bottom left there, actually providing, support for the mental health and well-being of their employees during COVID. So there's so many different ways that you can show up. And, it's very important for employees to see that you recognize them, that you support them, that you see their whole human being, especially in this challenging time. And so what is one new way that you could activate your team toward that goal? How could you educate, engage, or inspire your employees? Could you do a volunteer day and just pop it in the chat for others to see? What is one way that you found is working now? Like, for example, with our team at WeFirst, we used to go to a restaurant up the street where we used to go, near our offices all the time. And one day we ordered takeout food from that restaurant, everyone's favorite dish from that restaurant. And we sent the background picture of that restaurant to all of our employees. And then everyone put that as their Zoom background, and everyone had, the delivery to their home, and everyone ate that same food with that same background in the background. And it was kind of like being there. And it was just a fun and silly way of rallying everyone around kind of the things that we used to do. What other things are you finding that's working for you? Are you getting employees to donate or to volunteer? And Kim's saying, oh, maybe I should steal that idea. Please steal that idea. And also I saw someone the other day, they went to a llama farm, and they actually got someone at a llama farm to video up close the llamas, and everyone had a llama farm experience. So, nothing is off base, nothing is sort of out of bounds. I think some people have been a little bit weary of the, Friday cocktail, shall we say, or the drinks or session remotely on Zoom because they're so weary of Zoom calls. So think about what you could do, especially if there are areas that are opening up and everyone is vaccinated safely in your region. And I think I hear some background noise, so maybe if we can just mute just to make sure that everyone can hear clearly. And Jillian says here, we did an employee giving competition between departments and increased our total percentage of engagement to this by 15%. I mean, it's so, so powerful. Thanks for that great example. And I saw the other day that, who was it? One of the home delivery services actually put the photos of the folks that are actually working at the checkout of their stores, one of the retailers, on the Cheerio boxes. General Mills put their photos on the Cheerio boxes. And it made such a difference to the employees just during COVID to see some of their peers being celebrated for the role they're playing in raising funds during such a difficult time. And so, this is where you don't need to get lost in your head. You can lead with your heart. We've got from Carla here, our focus is to build culture that cares. We've created a platform that allows for a new movement to inspire even more skill sharing and to facilitate gigs amongst friends, colleagues, and your community. So they're creating a platform where people can show up, in ways that are meaningful to them. Kim here talking about starting meetings with a few, good news updates. At our company, we always do strengths and stretches. We say, hey, what's going well in your life and what's not going well, just to help people understand the whole human being. Mick here is saying that, leaders share an embarrassing story at the beginning of a co-creation session. Yeah, it's great to humanize leadership right now. For leadership to say, hey, we're struggling, we're tired, we're overwhelmed. I think everyone is so weary of the whole sort of toll of COVID, not just tragically on human lives, but on our mental health and this long Groundhog Day experience that they're having. So just show that, we are human, and sharing of that, the sharing of the stories of failure, Mick is saying here, can increase creative output up by 30%. So, it's just allowing people to be who they are. So very, very important. And if we're building on here, we had putting purpose first. We then had set ambitious goals. Then we're engaging, educating, and inspiring employees. And now we're working further out inside the company to co-own, co-author, and co-create impact with customers. And that is the fourth stage. So we're looking externally now. And a great contribution from Kim who said, we created a kudos board with client partner quotes to remind us of our strength and purpose. I think people at work always say crazy things. And we all know the personalities of the people we work for. And when they say some gem, you capture it on that board and you put it up there. And it just becomes this touchstone for the company where everyone has a laugh. And that's so important. So we're building beyond employees to consumers, to our customers, and allow them to co-own the process. Co-own the process. And what does that look like? Well, have a look at all the different ways that Ben & Jerry's has shown up. They are so articulate about their goals and the issues they're committed to. And they pull it all the way through from leadership, where Ben and Jerry seem to get arrested with some frequency. I might not suggest that, but that's an option. All the way through to their products. Here you see with the Resist product down the bottom here, and you see them on the cover of Bloomberg's, corporate activism with a cherry on top. There is no aspect of their business that is not put to work for their commitment. And, on their own website, they say that Ben and Jerry's is a social justice business that happens to make ice cream. In that order, very, very instructive, Or if you look at how you can use your media, you may recall that during the height of COVID and the Black Lives Matter movement, Twitter actually gave over its media buy to users to really give, their support of the Black Lives Matter movement, a bigger stage. So they gave over, their very expensive media buy to really shine a spotlight on the opinions of their users that they were aligned around. So, very, very powerful example. So you can use leadership, you can use your products, you can use your media. So let's think about that for 1 second. What is one new way that you could collaborate with your community towards, your goal, your impact goal? What's one new way that you could collaborate with your community? What about crowdsourcing ideas in terms of innovation and what they need? Or look at the partnership that you see, between the airlines out there right now with Eco Skies, where all the airlines have come together and they've said corporate travel, business travel can now offset their carbon footprint by paying a little bit more. Why? Because they want to mitigate risk to their industry. They want to get people flying again. And also, they're thinking about their purpose and how to bring it to life in new ways. What is one idea, and just pop it in the chat, that you've had where you thought, wow, this really worked with our customers? Like, for example, there were those brands that reached out and they got customers to help them generate PPE equipment and masks during COVID. So there are so many opportunities where you can put your brand to work, put your product to work, put your industry to work collaboratively. For example, we see here from Kim hosting peer-to-peer discussions on various topics to gather feedback, trends, and sharing expertise. LinkedIn used their HR platform to help connect 500 healthcare workers to provide support to them during the pandemic, and help match another 500,000 volunteers to opportunities with the Red Cross. Jillian here is saying, our alumni association has started partnering with various college departments to create programming missing in the student experience so they're ready for the real workplace. I mean, it's so, so powerful. This is about unlocking, our heart-led, full human being and recognizing the same in our customers or consumers, and Sophie was saying the story she shared previously was a partnership between Parkland Hospital staff and Central Market, and it was a company-wide initiative to write thank you letters to feed the entire labor and delivery staff on Thanksgiving Day. You do that for others, but it absolutely transforms your experience of work itself when you're making a difference to others' lives. Fulfillment is not an outside job. It's not what other people say about you. It's an inside-out job where you fill yourself up by what you give to others. And let's keep moving to the last stage, which is, okay, you've put purpose first, you've set ambitious goals, you've engaged, educated, inspired employees, and now you're co-creating with customers and consumers. Now, one step further, above and beyond, to really create an impact that drives business growth, that allows you to become a movement, that engages all stakeholders so everyone's building your business, is to disrupt your industry and shape culture. To disrupt your industry and shape culture. And Vanessa is sharing here that for Earth Month, we hosted a panel of experts from a couple of companies we collaborate with, and it went really well. So, hosting forums of thought leadership to help us understand the role we need to play in the world. A great example. So how do you disrupt your industry and leadership? Well, industry and culture. I mean, it can be fundamental to what you make as a product and who you are as a company. Here you see Ripple, whose name is all about the ripple effect. If you see in the top right there, when you drink Ripple, the positive impact ripples through our world. It's called the ripple effect. And they have a lot of metrics and data, and it's a pea protein alternative to dairy. Why? Dairy, for a lot of people, it doesn't suit their body, but most importantly, industrial farming and, the consequence of cattle and its contribution to, carbon emissions and global warming and methane and and unsustainable agriculture is a real issue. And this is from Adam Lowry, that disrupted the cleaning category with Method. Now he's doing Ripple, and now he wants to disrupt the sugar category, and he's launched a company called Sugar Break. So this is about going in and wholesale disrupting industries. And what about Harry's, the subscription razor company, that during the pandemic, they're disrupting their industry they thought, okay, who are our core audience? Who can we speak to authentically? And it was young men. And then what is the biggest challenge for young men right now? Well, they're suffering a lot of mental health. In fact, the incidence of suicide amongst young men who lost their jobs, their future, and their prospects went through the roof. And so they provided mental health support. And look at this ad here on the left. Be a man. Don't say that. Don't be tough. Don't be stoic. Don't be a rock. Don't be the breadwinner. It's okay to not be okay. And so suddenly someone that's selling you a subscription razor was working with Crisis Text Line to help people really feel okay and to help them get through, this very, very challenging time. And so what's the issue that you could lean into shape culture? If there is a crisis like the climate emergency, the pandemic, the social inequities exposed so dramatically during the Black Lives Matter movement, what can you do to make that difference? Find something that's authentic and appropriate to who you are, rather than just latching onto something that might be sort of tenuous or, top of mind that month. Or if you're in the investor class or, private equity, it's really interesting to see BVP, Brand Velocity Partners, that are actually launching a new model in private equity that shares the gains with employees. So when they take a company public, the employees actually benefit from that windfall to the company when they go public. So, you can even look at, even if you're in the private equity world, you can look at things differently and say, how can we allow this to execute against our purpose more effectively? How can we transform our industry by setting a precedent that nobody's thought of, that afterwards everyone look back and go, why were we not doing that? I mean, employees are stakeholders in our future, the same way the planet is. So I'd love you to put into the chat here for this last area. What is one area of your industry or society you most want to change? And as a provocation here, how do you think about doing that? Well, challenge stereotypes. Think about Like a Girl, that campaign by Always, which is a P&G brand. They went out there and they said, why do people imply that girls are less than somehow from a physical aspect? It's always, boys are stronger and tougher and better. And they turned that stereotype on its head. And it became a massive girls empowerment platform across the country that drove product sales. Or reinvent your category, as I've touched on. Look at it through fresh eyes and say, what does the world need? Because all of these societal and marketplace problems or challenges are actually opportunities in disguise. And then reimagine industry norms, like I was sharing with BVP. Look at what is going on in your industry and the way it's always been done, and then tell yourself, okay, how can I do it differently that's more responsible to the future we want to create? And so put a few suggestions in the chat box here. We hear from Carol here, better communication skills. I think, in business, for so long, we would walk through the door every day and we put on this professional avatar of ourselves. We'd leave our personal life at home. We'd all talk in certain ways. We'd behave in certain ways. I think if there is a silver lining to COVID, is we've all seen each other's kitchens and living rooms and bathrooms and kids and cats. I have a cat called Pippi who insists on every client call to walk front and center onto screen and introduce herself. It's really humanized us all. We've got some other examples here. Make sure your internal operations match your external do-gooding. Yeah, that alignment internally and externally is huge. In the tech world, Vanessa, we want to bridge the digital divide and reduce e-waste, the largest waste stream in our landfills, this strategic obsolescence of products. Scott, act with kindness. That sounds so obvious and simple, but it's hard. But then you see brands like Kind Bars out there with their Be Kind campaign, actually inspiring and activating moments of kindness. Lack of accurate representation and access to resources to individual artists in the arts and entertainment. Along with, the restaurant world and events, artists and entertainment have suffered so much during the last 14, 15 months, and they really do need that support. Fatma was saying, create impact-driven partnerships. Jennifer, create time for thinking, writing, to unschedule. I think we all need to unwind the way that we used to live. I think we've all been in triage mode for so long in the last 15 months, just keeping our business alive, keeping our families going, trying to keep some sort of balance in our mental health. But hopefully we're not all going to jump back on planes and all that sort of thing. And, as Joanne says here, consider untraditional partnerships. And Janet, mental health priority for stressful workplace. I don't think any of us have really had the chance to fully process what we've all been through with the fear of COVID, with the political unrest, with the upheaval of the Black Lives Matter movement. It's so important for us to actually take a moment and process that. And Carla here, unconditional partnerships. No one company, no one person, no one billionaire, no one industry is going to solve for all of these issues. We have to do it collaboratively. And so this is what I mean. We've got to lead with we. We've got to work together to provide solutions that benefit everyone. And Amy here is everyone deserves a 2-week paid vacation before restarting. I'm with Amy. I'm with Amy. Amy, make it so. Make it so. And everyone has to put their pens down. No one else is allowed to keep going, because if one person keeps going, it has this huge knock-on effect and everyone keeps going and they all keep going faster and faster. And then it's 11 o'clock at night and you're answering emails and it's Saturday and you're like, what happened? So yes, we've got to do that. And Jacques is saying, I have a hard time considering only one goal. Isn't it better to make even 1% of each SDG possible than to succeed in 100%? Yeah, I think we've got the opportunity with B Corps, which are benefit corporations. We've got ESG, environmental, social, and governance metrics that we can hold ourselves accountable to. And we've got the Sustainable Development Goals, which are these 17 goals established in 2015 by over 200 heads of state that look at childhood mortality or education, access to clean water, sustainable cities, and you can work against those. And I agree, I think, Jacques, some companies or industries are better suited to serve certain goals, but collaboratively, we've got to address all of them. And we're not moving fast enough. We're doing better than we did on the Millennial Development Goals, but we're not moving fast enough on the SDGs. And I think that we have the opportunity to really reimagine the role of business more broadly, to unlock an incredible innovation opportunity to solve for all these marketplace needs. And by doing so, repurpose our individual roles, the roles of our employees, the roles of our company. And I think we're going to look back of necessity and choice, but of necessity in the next 5 to 10 years and say, what the hell were we doing with business before? We were literally putting ourselves out of business as a company and as a species, because if we ruin the planet, if we ruin our cities, if we ruin our infrastructure, if we ruin our middle class, how are we going to sell our product and grow? How are we going to sell in a way that is responsible and inspires others to build our business? So, I want to sort of open up to a few more questions at the end here, but I want to just share some closing thoughts here, which is really when your goals, culture, and community and marketing are all aligned and they tell that simple, consistent, and scalable story, Patagonia, save our home planet, Unilever, to make sustainable living possible, that invites everyone to play a role, all stakeholders, and then you can create impact that drives growth. And here's the reasons I'm so optimistic right now, because it's very easy to wring your hands and just go, wow, how are we ever going to get out of this mess? For the first time, we have the requisite coalition of stakeholders at the table. We have suppliers, leaders, employees, customers and consumers, but most importantly, the investor class, which really is now holding large public companies that can have a lot of negative impact, but also a lot of positive impact accountable. And that's when you unlock all the market forces. That's when consumers want more conscious products. That's when investors provide funding for those new companies that are going to provide those products. That's when those new companies steal market share, 1 or 2% from the big boys or big girls, who then retool what they're doing because they realize the marketplace has changed. And the more and more everybody does that, the more and more leverage you have to make a difference in the world. So it's hard to get that plane off the ground. It's hard to get it airborne and take on momentum. But the more of us that do it individually, the greater weight we have collectively, and the greater weight we have collectively, the more momentum it builds on its own. And we're at the beginning of this fundamental transformation in business that is going to really remake our future. It's going to rewrite our future. Why? Because we have to, and human beings have a great survival instinct. but also because we want to, because inside all of us, we feel that innate connection to each other and to the planet. And now we just need to restore that. It's not about doing something new. It's about remembering what we forgot. And so to that end, if you want to create impact that drives business growth, and because of your business growth, you can create greater impact, put purpose first. Set ambitious goals. Engage, activate, and inspire employees. Co-own, co-author, and co-create with customers, and disrupt your industry and shape culture. And that all builds telescopically on each other, so the sum is greater than the parts. And that's when your company becomes a movement. That's when your organization takes on a life of its own. And I'm deeply passionate about this. If you really want to deep dive more into this and really get a roadmap for how you go about it, for the last 10 years, we've been doing this work with purpose leaders out there. And I have a new book coming out in November, and you can pre-order it now. It's called leadwithwe.com, leadwithwe.com, the business revolution that will save our future. And we walk through countless examples of small companies, mid-sized companies, and large companies, and really all the levels of their business, how to get it done in a way that's going to drive growth so that we can have that abundant, sustainable, and regenerative future. So do check it out, leadwithwe.com. And I want to answer any other questions that we have. We have a few minutes left, and I want to make sure, and thank you, Vanessa, for being excited about the book. So we've got 5 minutes left. Any other questions that are plaguing you right now? Anything that keeps you up at night? We've been lucky enough to see a lot of different solutions inside companies that are doing this